Lakhs of people use the Indian Railways every day to reach new destinations. But this train was taking us, a select team of medical and paramedical professionals from Delhi, to a new experience, to a different way of looking at life. The team led by Dr. R.K. Kapoor, Chairman, Daya Memorial Charitable Trust, DMCT, based in Munirka, New Delhi, comprised of 5 other doctors, about 10 paramedical staff, and a few volunteers. The DMCT team was heading to attend their first medical camp nearly 900 kilometers away in a village called Dwari, about 40 kilometers from Rewa in Madhya Pradesh. With limited means, our only motivation was Daya Memorial Charitable Trust's strong desire to take modern healthcare to that part of the population in India which needs it the most but have the least access to it. Mostly because of the lack of means and sometimes the almost complete lack of medical facilities at the time of need. Daya Memorial Charitable Trust, popularly known as DMCT, with its headquarters at Munirka, a southern suburb of New Delhi, has been active in the area of healthcare for the last more than 2 decades. Highly reputed for its services, it has generated a lot of trust and public confidence in and around the area it operates in. While our priority has always been to provide the best possible healthcare to all those who come here looking for medical care, DMCT in the past has occasionally been involved in organizing free health awareness drives and occasional free medical checkups for various ailments. But somehow, these awareness campaigns and occasional free medical services remain confined to its Munirka premises only. Perhaps because the ready access to medical and paramedical support available here made it easier for us to function. But requests from other centers were frequent and persistent. The medical camp at Dwari was the first outing for the entire team. Our team was anxious, excited, and a little apprehensive too, having absolutely no clue about what the experience would turn out to be like. Going by the statistics, India is the second most populous country in the world. Traditionally, it is a nation of rural, agrarian economy. Nearly 3/4 of the population still live in rural areas, and as of 2004, an estimated 27.5% of Indians were living below the national poverty line. Some 300 million people in India live on less than $1 a day, and more than 50% of all children are malnourished. Dwari turned out to be no different. The roads were reminders of the moonscape. The houses were little more than shanties, and what passed for sanitation facilities were open-air dumps with almost nil privacy. No wonder then that in this village with a population of less than 500 or so, the team ended up treating more than 2,000 people, some of them coming from as far as 100 kilometers away. But that was later. Initially, the enthusiasm among the locals was limited, as the local primary school was taken up for the campsite, utilizing even its corridors to set up various facilities. The locals were a bit apprehensive of the intentions and the capabilities of the team. Not surprising really, as this was the first time that a proper medical camp was being set up in this village at the back of beyond. No one before us had ever established a temporary pathology lab and X-ray unit the way it was set up within hours. However, the moment the first lot of patients came out after treatment, the word spread to the nearby villages as well.
इसके पहले तो कुछ नहीं हुआ यहाँ, ये पहली बार ऐसा मौका प्राप्त हुआ है कि मतलब सभी लोग यहाँ आके अपना चेकअप करवाए और अच्छी तरह से उनकी जांच हुई, चेक हुआ, दवा मिली सभी को.
The team had expected a few hundred patients at the most, given the village's population of 400, and this sudden unexpected rush led to a heavy overload on resources brought in from Delhi.
यहाँ डॉक्टर से बहुत अच्छा लग रहा, ऐसे सब दिन आए डॉक्टर, बहुत अच्छा है, अच्छे डॉक्टर हैं, बहुत अच्छा लग रहा.
For the next 2.5 days, the entire team worked non-stop from early morning to late night, and yet patients had to wait hours for their turn.
ये बोल रहे हैं कि जो कैंप लगा है उससे भी हर साल भी आए कैंप। अच्छा लग रहा है कैंप, ऐसा घर बैठे दवा हम लोग नहीं सोच सकते हैं कि ये दवा हम लोग को मिलेगी।
Some of the patients had to battle rain, and some chose to camp in the school premises overnight. But there was one thing common to all of them. All of them desperately needed medical help, and that's what kept our energy levels high all the time. The patients were afflicted with all kinds of diseases, some age-related and others caused by poor sanitation and an almost complete lack of health care. All that makes India face a heavy burden of ill health was evident here. Lack of sanitation and safe drinking water, malnutrition, poor living conditions, limited access to curative health services, and virtually no access to preventive health care services. Compounded with the lack of education and gender inequality. It is said that almost everywhere the poor suffer poor health and the very poor suffer appallingly. Dwari turned out to be a perfect example of that. Supplies ran out soon, and more supplies had to be bought from the nearby towns. It was also for the first time, but these villagers saw someone come to their doorstep to check their eyesight.
डॉक्टर ने मेरा आँख चेक किया टार्च लगा करके, और चेक करने के बाद हमको चश्मा लिखा। जो चश्मा लगाने के बाद इस तरह की चश्मा लगाया, इस तरह के, और कहा कि ये पढ़िए। जब पढ़े हम यहाँ हिंदी से, तो हमको अच्छा लगा। अब बहुत अच्छा हमको इस प्रकार की रोशनी मिली, जिस तरह की नई दुनिया मिल गई हो।
There was an endless stream of people to take advantage of the facility.
दवाई मिली, चश्मा मिला, अच्छे डॉक्टर हैं।
The 300 pairs of spectacles that we carried with us for free distribution looked like a drop in this ocean of deprivation. The villagers braved rain, waited for hours, and a couple of hundreds came from unbelievable distances.
मैं केदारनाथ पाठक ग्राम पतुलखी जिला सीधी से लगभग 200 किलोमीटर दूर से आया हूँ, और यहाँ आज 15 तारीख को डॉक्टर से भेंट होने के बाद हमको काफ़ी खुशी और आनंद प्राप्त हुई, और हमारा काम संतोषजनक रहा।
The crowd had to be managed and impressed upon that all of them would be able to meet the doctors, provided they maintained peace and remained patient. Even while the team was packing up to leave, each one of us kept wishing that we could stay longer. If the next camp, organized at Kalyanpura in the Chavua district of Madhya Pradesh, was different from the first one, it was only because the number of patients here went up to over 3,000. The rest of the picture was the same. The poverty, the ignorance, the lack of sanitation, the lack of education, widespread diseases, and the almost total absence of health services. Everything looked like a replay of the first camp at Dwari. The team worked even longer hours this time and left with an even heavier heart. We thought that we now had a fairly comprehensive understanding of the state of medical care in rural India. But the next two camps in the hilly areas of Uttarakhand once again proved to be eye-openers for us. The beauty of the mountains attracts and mesmerizes hundreds of thousands of tourists every year. But these same mountains show a much harsher, a much more cruel face to its children. Life here is even more difficult, and the health situation even more pathetic. During the third camp at Dholchina, 24 kilometers from Almora, a mind-boggling 70% incidence of breath-related diseases, mainly tuberculosis, were discovered among those below 40 years of age. This was partly because of unhygienic upbringing, but mostly because of the consumption of tobacco from an early age, which is resorted to in order to dull the pain and fatigue arising out of the hard life among the mountains. Dental care was practically nil, and ophthalmic conditions were equally pathetic, irrespective of age. The living conditions and territorial compulsions of life in the hilly areas offer their own challenges and drawbacks. Life is comparatively tougher in the hills than in the plains, and all the more so if one comes from the poor strata of society. The team faced more or less the same scenario during the camp at Sarai Khet, 80 kilometers from Ramnagar. One has to pass through the enchanting Corbett National Park to reach this small village with a population of less than 400. But once again, we ended up treating over 3,000 people here. The medical conditions of the patients who attended was the same as found in the 3 earlier camps. The conditions were pathetic and the need for a total medical reform in the area most urgent.
ये जो कैंप यहाँ पर लगा है, ये पहली बार हमको ये सारी सुविधाएं यहाँ पर उपलब्ध हुई हैं। एक्सरे मशीन है, ब्लड की जांच हो रही है, यूरिन टेस्ट हो रहा है और भी तमाम सुविधाएं हैं जो यहाँ पर उपलब्ध हुई हैं। ये पहली बार इस क्षेत्र में हुई है, इस क्षेत्र का बड़ा सौभाग्य है।
DMCT added a new feather to its cap by administering hepatitis B injections to nearly 2,000 school children besides a few toddlers. Many in the press and administration refuse to believe the claims of vaccinating 2,000 kids in a village of 400. But DMCT achieved another unprecedented feat when it followed up the original vaccination to complete its 0-1-6 cycle. This means that it administered the follow-up doses to all those 2,000 plus children after a month and then again after 6 months. The cynics saw the turnout with their own eyes this time and turned into believers.
यह बहुत खुशी की बात है कि यहाँ पर जो कुमाऊं और गढ़वाल के इस बिहार इलाके में आपका दया मेमोरियल चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट बच्चों के इलाज की भावना से यहाँ पर आया है और आपने इस स्थान को चुना जहाँ की आने में बड़ी कठिनाई है। सामान्यतः गाड़ियाँ नहीं आती हैं, लेकिन आप इतने अच्छे वाहन को लाने का यहाँ पर जोखिम उठा सके और उसमें टीके यहाँ पर लाए और वो भी विशेषकर हेपेटाइटिस बी का टीका जो कि यहाँ पर अस्पतालों में उपलब्ध नहीं होता और कहीं दूर दूर तक 400-500 किलोमीटर की दूरी से पहले मिलता ही नहीं है।
The skeleton team of 1 doctor, 3 nurses and a few volunteers managed this triumph with untiring dedication. Only those who have lived in the hilly areas can grasp the difficulty involved in rounding up all these children and bringing them to the campsite repeatedly.
जितने बच्चे हैं ये गरीब परिवारों के निर्धन ये हम लगा नहीं सकते। यहाँ पर सभी को निःशुल्क ये टीके लगाए गए, बहुत अच्छा लगा।
Here at Sarai Khet, the DMCT made another beginning by including a gynecologist in the team. Local women, and particularly young mothers, had so many questions to ask that the session went on for long beyond the scheduled time. It is apparent that when it comes to healthcare, there are 2 Indias. The India that provides high-quality medical care to those who can afford to pay, including medical tourists, and the other India, where citizens have limited or no access to quality healthcare. And this is the country in which the majority of the population lives.
खून जांच भी हो रही है, एक्सरे भी हो रही है और आँखों का भी टेस्ट हो रहा है, चश्मा भी मिल रहा है और मतलब कि जो दुख तकलीफ है इंजेक्शन भी लग रहा है, बच्चों को टीका भी लग रहा है।
The rural poor are usually compelled to avail of healthcare at the hands of unqualified practitioners in times of need, completely unaware of the dangers that they expose themselves to. While the rural poor suffer because of planning or execution inadequacies that leave them with a limited number of government-supported medical facilities, the poor living in urban areas fare even worse because they cannot afford to visit the private facilities that thrive in India's metros or big cities. From the 14th to the 17th of June 2013, the state of Uttarakhand and adjoining areas received nearly about 400% more rain than the benchmark during a normal monsoon. This caused the Mandakini River to erupt in the area, leading to heavy destruction in the entire valley. The upper Himalayan territories of Uttarakhand are full of forests and snow-covered mountains and thus remain relatively inaccessible. They are home to some very popular and historical pilgrimage sites and several tourist spots and trekking routes. Heavy rainfall for 4 consecutive days and the melting snow aggravated the floods, resulting in a huge loss of life and property. On the 28th and 29th of September 2013, we organized a 2-day medical camp in the area at a place called Sialsor Chandrapuri, about 30 kilometers further ahead of Rudraprayag on the way to the Kedarnath temple. The nature of the sufferings here were a bit different. The entire area was still struggling to recover from the devastation it had suffered just about 3 months ago. A majority of the patients were suffering from post-devastation anxiety, besides the normal health problems people in distant hills generally suffer from. The terrain here was tough, and the washing away of a number of bridges caused untold hardships to those living in distant areas. Even crossing a small river became a nearly insurmountable challenge. Even under such challenging and extremely difficult situations, the camp attracted nearly 2,000 needy patients. DMCT salutes the zeal and determination of the local populace as they struggle to bring their lives back to normal and commits its services for all times to come as and when the call is raised.
देखो जी, मेन कैंप्स के बारे में मेरा ये भावना है कि मैं कहीं तीर्थ वगैरह करने की बजाय ये समझता हूँ अगर किसी गरीब आदमी की सेवा हो जाए जो लाचार है तो वो अच्छा है, और यही भावना मैंने डॉक्टर साहब के बीच में देखी है.
With a ratio of less than 50 doctors per 100,000 patients in India, DMCT tries its best to reach the needy poor and looks forward to continue the efforts with much more enthusiasm, commitment and dedication.
आँख देखने की आँख नहीं देख रही है और जिल जोड़ी से आँख देख रखा है, सुबह क्या खाई सुखी क्या खाया है डॉक्टर.
The experience gained through these camps can best be defined as eye-opening. All over rural India, health services are virtually non-existent, and our endeavor is to reach as many of the suffering populace as possible. DMCT has taken a silent pledge to continue its efforts in providing the best healthcare to all those that it can reach and desires to set up as many permanent healthcare facilities as possible, primary, secondary, and even at the tertiary level, where the poor and the resourceful are treated with equal respect and equal care. A big dream indeed. It sounds like building castles in the air, given today's healthcare scenario. But then, someone has to take the initiative. We invite you to be part of us. We look for your support. Your kind support will help us go a long way. The challenges are nearly insurmountable for a small group, but with your help, we can aspire to achieve the impossible. You can help us by volunteering for the camps, or by sponsoring medicine and other supplies, or through donations. For details, you can write to us dmct.delhi@gmail.com or phone us 011 2610 0266, telefax 011 2610 1363.